The studio lights were on, the cameras were rolling, and in that single uncomfortable moment everything began to feel wrong as Britain's most powerful names quietly changed hands, not through war or invasion but through calm boardroom decisions that no one could stop, leaving even voices like Piers Morgan struggling to keep control as history shifted live on air, and the question was no longer who was winning, but whether anyone in the United Kingdom had noticed that the ownership of their future had already slipped away. The studio lights burned white and unforgiving. Piers Morgan sat rigid in his chair. The air smelled of hot cables and polished wood. A producer whispered numbers in his ear. Market values. Ownership stakes. Foreign acquisitions. Piers felt a tightening behind his eyes. The screen behind him flickered. Logos of once untouchable British giants appeared. Steel. Energy. Ports. Telecommunications. Each logo dissolved into the same word. India. His fingers pressed into the armrest. The leather felt colder than it should. A low hum filled the studio. Not from the speakers. From his chest. The anchor beside him shifted uncomfortably. Cameras rolled closer. Red lights blinked like warning signals. Piers glanced at the teleprompter. The text scrolled faster. Tata. Reliance. Adani. Names that sounded distant. Names that now owned familiar streets. Factories where his father once worked. Brands he grew up trusting. His mouth went dry. The taste of metal crept onto his tongue. Outside the glass walls, London glimmered. Rain streaked down like thin fractures. The city looked smaller. Quieter. As if listening. A graphic flashed. Britain's largest company. Majority stake acquired. The date pulsed in bold red. Today. Piers felt heat rise up his neck. His heartbeat drummed in his ears. The studio felt tighter. The ceiling lower. The past heavier. He remembered old headlines. Empire. Control. Global power. The words now sounded hollow. A director counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. Piers opened his mouth to speak. No sound came out at first. The silence stretched. Uncomfortable. Exposed. The camera zoomed in. Every wrinkle sharpened. Every breath amplified. Behind the lens, the Indian tricolor appeared faintly reflected. Not on a flag. On the glass. On his face. Piers blinked hard. His vision wavered. The numbers on the screen changed again. Another acquisition confirmed. Another British icon transferred. His chair creaked as he leaned forward. The lights seemed harsher now. Almost accusatory. His voice finally emerged. Lower than usual. Tighter. He spoke the headline slowly. Each word felt heavier than the last. As he spoke, the studio door opened slightly. Cool air rushed in, carrying the distant sound of traffic. And something else. A sense of being watched. The cool air brushed his skin like an unwanted reminder. Piers swallowed hard. The taste of metal deepened. The city noise outside grew louder. Engines. Horns. Footsteps rushing somewhere important. The producer waved frantically from behind the camera. Piers barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the screen. Another chart appeared. Share prices climbing. British ownership shrinking. Indian capital expanding like a shadow at sunset. The studio clock ticked loudly. Each second felt deliberate. Almost mocking. Sweat gathered at his temples. The makeup lights trapped the heat. His collar felt too tight. The words he spoke sounded unfamiliar. As if someone else was using his voice. He mentioned globalization. He mentioned free markets. The phrases echoed without comfort. Behind him, images changed again. A dockyard on the Thames. A steel plant in Wales. An energy grid stretching across England. Each image stamped with new ownership. Piers felt a dull ache in his chest. Not pain. Pressure. Like history leaning forward. The anchor beside him cleared her throat. Her eyes flicked sideways. Brief. Nervous. She knew what the audience felt. Confusion. Disbelief. A quiet unease. The director's voice crackled in his earpiece. Urgent. Sharper now. Piers nodded slightly. He adjusted his posture. Tried to regain control. The desk felt solid beneath his palms. Too solid. As if it belonged to someone else. Outside, rain intensified. Drops struck the windows harder. London blurred into streaks of grey and gold. The city looked tired. Old. Vulnerable. A graphic flashed unexpectedly. Historic comparison. Past empires rising. Past empires fading. The implication hung in the air. Unspoken. Heavy. Piers inhaled deeply. The smell of ozone and electronics filled his lungs. His heartbeat slowed. Then surged again. A message appeared on the studio monitor. Breaking update. Another deal finalized. Minutes ago. The room seemed to tilt. Very slightly. Enough to unsettle. His fingers trembled. He curled them into a fist. The leather creaked softly. The camera moved closer again. Too close. Every blink felt exposed. Every breath sounded loud. He spoke again. This time sharper. More defensive. The words landed flat. They did not reassure. They did not convince. Behind the scenes, staff exchanged glances. Silent. Tense. No one smiled. The Indian company logo filled the screen. Bright. Confident. Unapologetic. Piers stared at it longer than necessary. Something twisted in his stomach. Not anger. Not fear. Recognition. The realization crept in slowly. This was not sudden. This was patient. Strategic. Decades in the making. The studio felt colder now. The cool air no longer refreshing. It felt invasive. Like a draft through a cracked foundation. His voice lowered further. Almost a whisper carried by microphones. The audience leaned closer. At home. In pubs. On night buses rolling through wet streets. They listened. Not for outrage. For understanding. Another image appeared. A boardroom table. Polished wood. Empty British chairs. Occupied Indian executives. Their faces calm. Focused. Certain. Piers felt his throat tighten. The past he defended felt distant. The future unfolding felt unstoppable. The red recording light pulsed steadily. Like a heartbeat not his own. The show continued. But something fundamental had shifted. In the studio. In the city. Inside him. Inside him, a quiet fracture widened. Piers felt it spreading. Slow. Relentless. Like ice beneath stone. He leaned back slightly. The chair resisted. Stiff. Unforgiving. The studio ceiling hummed. Ventilation pushed air downward. Cold against his scalp. He glanced at the crew again. Their faces looked different now. Less confident. More watchful. As if they were witnessing something irreversible. Another data stream rolled across the screen. Foreign direct investment totals. Numbers stacked higher than expected. Higher than promised. His pulse quickened. The sound thudded behind his ears. Each beat echoed the same thought. Control was slipping. Not stolen. Purchased. Quietly. Legally. A producer stepped closer to the glass. Her lips moved without sound. Urgent. Warning. Piers nodded again. A mechanical gesture. His eyes stayed forward. The camera caught a reflection in his pupils. A skyline. London at night. But something was off. The buildings looked owned. Tagged. Catalogued. Like assets on a balance sheet. His voice rose slightly. An attempt at authority. It wavered halfway through the sentence. He corrected himself. Chose stronger words. They still felt weak. The studio clock ticked louder now. Tick. 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 Each sound pressed against his temples. He loosened his tie. The fabric slid against his skin. Too smooth. Almost foreign. Another graphic appeared without warning. British household brands. Food. Transport. Infrastructure. All highlighted in the same color. Saffron. Green. White. The colors glowed softly. Unthreatening. That unsettled him more. Piers inhaled sharply. His lungs burned slightly. Too much air. Too little certainty. The anchor beside him shifted again. Her pen slipped from her fingers. It hit the desk with a soft click. Too loud in the silence. No one laughed. No one moved. The director did not cut away. This moment was staying. Piers realized it suddenly. This discomfort was the story. The audience could feel it. The tightness. The imbalance. The sense of standing on old ground that no longer belonged to them. A faint vibration ran through the floor. The underground trains passing below. London moving as it always had. Yet the ownership above and below had changed. He spoke again. Slower now. Careful. Measured. Each word chosen like stepping stones over deep water. He mentioned opportunity. He mentioned partnership. The phrases tasted rehearsed. Hello. The screen behind him changed one last time. A timeline stretched across decades. Colonial past. Post-war decline. Modern globalization. The line ended at the present moment. A blinking marker. Here. Piers felt a chill travel down his spine. Not from fear alone. From understanding. History had turned its head. And it was looking directly at him. The red light above the camera glowed brighter. The studio seemed to hold its breath. London waited outside. Rain-soaked pavements. Lights reflected in puddles. People walking home unaware. Yet something fundamental had already shifted beneath their feet. Piers stared into the lens. No anger left. No bravado. Only a stark awareness. The power dynamic had changed. And it was happening live. And it was happening live. The lens felt closer than ever. As if it were leaning toward him. Listening. Judging. Piers steadied his breathing. The air felt heavier now. Thicker. Harder to pull into his lungs. A faint ringing began in his ears. High. Persistent. Almost electrical. The studio floor vibrated again. Subtle. Uneasy. The sound of London moving beneath them. He glanced down at his notes. The paper trembled slightly in his hands. Ink smudged where his thumb pressed too hard. He looked back up quickly. The camera caught everything. The hesitation. The tension. The moment of recalculation. Another notification flashed on the side monitor. Not scheduled. Not approved. A late addition. Major media group acquisition. United Kingdom based. Controlling stake transferred. The logo faded in slowly. Familiar. Influential. Piers felt his stomach drop. The room seemed to shrink around him. Walls inching closer. Lights glaring hotter. The makeup on his face felt thick. Like a mask he could not remove. The director's voice cut into his ear again. Lower now. Cautious. Piers did not respond. He did not need to. The message was clear. Proceed carefully. Very carefully. He shifted in his seat. The chair creaked again. A small sound. Yet it echoed in his chest. Behind the glass, a junior producer stared at the screen. Her eyes wide. Unblinking. As if she were watching a storm form without clouds. Piers spoke. His voice steady on the surface. Tight underneath. He described investment flows. Capital confidence. Strategic interest. The words lined up neatly. Too neatly. They failed to cover the discomfort crawling beneath them. The studio lighting flickered briefly. Barely noticeable. Enough to unsettle. A shadow crossed the backdrop. Then vanished. His pulse quickened again. The ringing in his ears softened. Replaced by a low thrum. Like distant machinery. Factories running far away. Owned by someone else. Another image appeared. A British boardroom photograph from decades earlier. Men in dark suits. Union Jack behind them. The image slid aside. Replaced by a modern boardroom. Brighter. Larger. Indian executives seated confidently. No flags visible. Just glass. Steel. Screens glowing with data. Piers felt a strange warmth spread across his face. Not embarrassment. exposure. As if something long assumed had been quietly removed. The anchor beside him adjusted her microphone. Her hand shook. Just slightly. She caught it quickly. Too late. The camera had seen it. Social media counters ticked upward on a hidden monitor. Engagement rising. Clips being shared. Comments flooding in faster than they could be read. This was resonating. Not as outrage. As realization. The city outside seemed to lean closer to the windows. Rain pressed harder. Lights blurred into streaks of color. Red buses moved like slow blood through the streets. Piers paused mid-sentence. Not intentionally. His mind had raced ahead. He saw headlines forming. Not tomorrow. Tonight. He felt a faint chill along his arms. Goosebumps beneath expensive fabric. The studio air conditioning surged again. Cold swept across the desk. Across his hands. He placed his palms flat. Grounding himself. The surface felt smooth. Too smooth. Like a polished deal already signed. The monitor updated again. Analyst commentary. Confident. Certain. There was no triumph in the language. No aggression. Just inevitability. That disturbed him more than anger ever could. Piers lifted his gaze. Straight into the lens. Into millions of eyes. He sensed it then. The collective unease. The shared awareness. The subtle shift from disbelief to acceptance. His voice softened. Not weaker. Different. He spoke about cycles. About history turning. About markets remembering what politics forgets. The words landed heavier now. The studio grew quiet. Even the background hum seemed to fade. Somewhere deep below, another train passed. Steel on steel. Momentum continuing. Uninterrupted. Piers blinked slowly. The image of the blinking timeline returned to his mind. The marker still flashing. Still here. Still now. Still moving forward. Still moving forward. Piers drew a measured breath. He let it out slowly. The ringing in his ears faded. The hum settled into silence. The studio felt steady again. Not familiar. Just stable enough to stand in. He straightened his back. Adjusted his papers. The small rituals returned. Anchors survive on ritual. The camera light softened. Not dimmer. Calmer. As if it understood the moment had passed. Piers spoke one final time. His tone even. Unadorned. He spoke of change without blame. Of capital without flags. Of a world rearranging itself quietly. No raised voice. No accusation. Only acknowledgement. The images behind him faded to black. No logos. No charts. Just darkness. London remained beyond the glass. Rain easing. Streets shining. People moving forward as they always did. The director raised a hand. A clean motion. The red light switched off. Silence followed. Deep. Complete. Piers removed his earpiece. The studio felt larger now. Less oppressive. More honest. He stood slowly. The chair no longer resisted. As he walked away from the desk, he caught his reflection once more. Not diminished. Not triumphant. Changed. History had not shouted. It had simply arrived. And everyone had felt it. The studio lights were on, the cameras were rolling, and in that single uncomfortable moment everything began to feel wrong as Britain's most powerful names quietly changed hands, not through war or invasion but through calm boardroom decisions that no one could stop, leaving even voices like Piers Morgan struggling to keep control as history shifted live on air, and the question was no longer who was winning, but whether anyone in the United Kingdom had noticed that the ownership of their future had already slipped away.